Okay, we're continuing our Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh. Kof Siman Kof Vav 106. So this siman, short siman, fundamental idea, namely the machlokes, the dispute that we've already had with regarding Hanan. But here's going to be a important byproduct of that dispute in terms of what is to be included in the 60 that is nullifying the prohibited food. Yeah? Essentially, that's what it is. But let's begin. Siman Kovav, chapter 106. Din Heich Mevatl V'Shishim, the law of how something is nullified in 60. Or you can say it's what is part of the 60 that would nullify the prohibited, and this includes three subsections. Aleph. Chaticha, a piece of meat or food. Shabala is that is absorbed, something not that's prohibited. The ain ba samach lavatli. And this food item doesn't have 60 to nullify that which is prohibited. Okay, so this food item cannot be eaten, obviously. But now, now this piece that it's in itself is fine, but it is prohibited by virtue of the fact that it absorbed something that's not kosher. And he said as considering that the machaber is of the view that we do not say chanan by other yisurim. So therefore, it will only nullify the next pot that falls into according to the ratio of how much not kosher it has in it. Namely, if the total of what is in this second pot, evening, can add the piece of meat itself, so the original piece of meat that absorbed non-kosher, plus everything else in that new pot, Shishim connected to Isser, have 60 relative to the prohibited. Habalua, that's absorbed in the first piece, Mutter Mashbekadera. Everything in the pot is permitted. So, considering the first piece is not Hanan, in the view of the Machaber, because it's Sharisum, it's other prohibited foods. Therefore, when you're nullifying this prohibition, you only need to nullify the prohibition itself. The original, not only do you only need to nullify the original prohibited, you don't need to nullify the whole piece that originally absorbed the prohibited. Moreover, the original piece that absorbed the prohibited can be part of the kosher 60 to nullify the prohibited that's in it. Clear? Aval bat. Yeah, be with me. Aval bat chaticha atzma. But the original piece itself, even though it isn't Hanan and doesn't need to be nullified, you only need to nullify the absorbed that's in it. And even it can be part of that which is nullifying. Nonetheless, the piece itself, Surah is forbidden. It remains forbidden. Why? Because the prohibited that it originally absorbed will not be extracted in its entirety. And thus, it itself will not have a nullification of 60, to the ratio. Even though the flavor that it contains, even though it itself will be part of the 60 to nullify the flavor it contains, because its presence itself will ensure that everything else that's there will have no more than a 60th of flavor. But nonetheless, it itself will still have more than a 60th of flavor, because it will not diffuse in its entirety the flavor that it absorbed. So the flavor will remain in it at a higher percentage than everywhere else. Skip the... Sorry?
Say a spoonful of fat fell on a not kosher piece of meat.
Yep.
And that whole
No way around. Spoon...
And that whole thing fell into a pot.
All the way around. A spoonful of non-kosher fat fell into a kosher piece of meat.
That's not what I said. I said backwards. I said,
yeah.
Okay.
Kosher piece of meat.
Kosher fat fell on a kosher meat. And
that,
then all of that fell into a pot.
Correct.
So now the meat itself
to be part of the 60.
60 has to be removed.
That's it.
And what you need is 60 against a spoonful of
60
fat.
against a spoonful of fat. That 60 includes the piece of meat that had originally absorbed that fat, but that piece of meat remains unkosher. Okay, now it's
That's the
Machaber. Skip the parentheses there, which is all the sources, and go to the second parentheses. V'chein ikir. And this is the primary way to think about it in the Machaber's view. U'deloi, and not, Kamosha Kosev, listen with something base, and not like he said in chapter 92, Daf Oisach Chatich Muteres. In Siman Tzadik Beis, where he discussed this in the context of Basa B'chalav, and there too, the question of Chanan by Shari Yisudim came up, and there the Machaber said, because of Chanan by Shari Yisudim, that even the original piece that absorbed that non-kosher will itself become kosher, because the flavor diffuses equally, which is contradiction to what he just said here, that the original piece of meat remains kosher. So come this.
Over there was Basa B'chalav in 92.
No, over there,
Very much more strange.
the context of Basa B'chalav, but over there, Shari Yisudim also came up, because over there, in Tzadik Beis, it says, Basa B'chalav yes Chanan, Shari Yisudim no Chanan, and because Shari Yisudim no Chanan, therefore you can eat the original piece of meat too, right? So that's a contradiction to what he said here. So there's a whole discussion on how to resolve that contradiction. The bottom line is, the primary is the way he writes it here. That's what the parenthesis is saying. The primary ruling is the way it says it here, which the original piece is treif. Original piece is not to be.
This is not going to be what, according to the Ramah, it's not, shouldn't hold from
So
this.
it's not going to be relevant for those who follow the Ramah, except for the following. In cases where, even in our shitta, we don't say Chanan by Shari Yisudim. For example, something that has been salted together with kosher, something that's absorbed by salting, or something that's there's hefsim meruba, we don't say Chanan by salting. Kavish Kamovish, I don't remember. But then we also, for example, if you don't know where the mixture is, but in the case of hefsim meruba, but we don't say you have to throw out all the pieces of meat. Okay, there are different cases where we're makel on Chanan by Shari Yisudim, and then we would apply this view of the Ramah. Okay, let's continue. By contrast, so this is all with respect to a piece of meat or a piece of food that's absorbed something not kosher. By contrast, but not so in contrast, something that has become completely dissolved, then nimuch, and is liquefied. For example, blood or something of that sort, which is non-kosher but completely liquefied, and it falls the toich roitev into a liquefied mixture, into some sort of gravy. Shall head to that as kosher. And now this bowl of gravy became prohibited because it doesn't have 60 to the ratio of the blood that fell into it. And then, not on purpose, because that you're not allowed to do, but accidentally, that kosher mixture that has a little bit of blood in it has now become, you expanded it, you added more to it. Shalheter of kosher liquid. And now there is 60 levat ladam to nullify the blood. Kula eats in entirety. All mutter is permitted. Unlike in the case of chaticha, where the original chaticha that absorbed non-kosher has to be removed. Even though it itself is part of the 60, it has to be removed. In the case where everything is liquefied, the original ounces that absorb the blood does not have to be removed, because everything is one big liquid. You can't find which ounces originally interacted with it. So the logic that the non-kosher didn't properly diffuse doesn't apply when it's liquefied, because everything is properly diffused. When there's a piece of meat that originally absorbed non-kosher, I could argue and say that that piece of meat didn't let go of everything that it absorbed in its entirety. Therefore, it remains usher. When it comes to liquid, I obviously cannot say that. It's not as if the original ounces that interacted with the blood has more of the blood in it than everything else. It's all completely blended. Exactly. Okay, that's the Machaber's view. Then comes the Ramah's view, however, which we know already. Again, and according to following our custom, our practice. To say, to rule, when it comes to all prohibited things, chanan, so the original piece of meat that absorbed that non-kosher itself becomes a prohibition. No difference if it's 60 times, if it's completely liquefied, or a dry item that absorbs a piece of meat, or anything else that's dry that has absorbed something non-kosher. There's no difference between the two. You'll always have to have 60 to the ratio against the original item that interacted with it. Because either the original few ounces became chanan. So if you had an ounce of blood that fell into 5 ounces of soup, now you'd have to have 60 to the ratio of 6 ounces. The original 5 ounces that became itself chanan plus the blood, or the piece of meat that absorbed non-kosher fat, and now you have to nullify the entirety of that piece of meat. No difference. Ella, but there is one difference between dry and liquid. Linyan zeh with the following matter. If the original item that absorbed the non-kosher was a dry, not liquid, was solid, not liquid. Dry is not the right word, it's solid. Piece of meat absorbed non-kosher. And you have 60 the ratio of the original piece of meat, and that's nullified. So you have 60 against the chanan, right? But nonetheless, that original piece of meat remains prohibited. You have to remove it in makira if you can identify it. So the only difference between liquid and solid, you always have to have 60 against the original prohibited stuff, whether it's liquid or solid. The volume has to be 60 to the volume of the original prohibited, whether the original prohibited was liquid or solid.
Liquid?
Or solid with liquids or anything else. But the only thing is that in the case of solid, if you can, you have to find the original solid that absorbed the non-kosher and take it out, even after you have 60 against it, because it's chanan. The main makira, and if you cannot identify it, but Taylor, it's nullified. So long as the piece is not a piece of meat worthy of serving to a guest, because if it's a piece of meat worthy of serving to a guest, then you would have to extract all the pieces that are bigger than that size. We spoke about this when we learned the laws of Chatzarah or Liskabed. Does it ring a bell? Mm-hmm. Yes? Now, so that's true if it's a solid. If the original thing that absorbed non-kosher is a solid, you have to find it and extract it. And if you can't find it and extract it, it's batul, unless it's Chatzarah or Liskabed, in which case you'd have to extract all the Chatzarah or Liskabed. But if the original thing that absorbed was liquid, so it's 5 ounces of soup that absorbed 1 ounce of blood, and now that 5 ounces that 6 ounces fell into how many ounces? 60 to the ratio of 6. Sorry? 360 ounces, is that right?
60 times 6.
Okay. I'm bad at math. 60 times, so 360 ounces of soup. Hakal butter, everything is permitted. Because you have 60 to the ratio of the original 6 ounces that originally became prohibited. See chapter 92 and 99. Okay. We mentioned before the practicality of following the mechaber in cases when we would be makel on chanan bashar yisurim. Number one, and number two, one way to think about this fact that the original item that absorbed becomes non-kosher, remains non-kosher, is to think of it this way. You could do hagala on kalim and extract the flavor. You can't go hagala on food, which is really what you're trying to do. You're trying to say
hagala on food.
Yeah. So the original piece of meat absorbed something non-kosher, and because now it's in a bigger pot of soup, I'm going to say it's kosherized because I did hagala and extracted the whole flavor. That doesn't apply. Hagala doesn't happen to food. It will still remain some of the flavor, and if it will still retain some of the flavor, and if so, within it, it's not going to be 6 to the ratio of nullification, and thus it will remain also even according to the mechaber. In the way he learns it here, as opposed to Tzadik Beis, where there he's more lenient. Okay, so Beis.
And that's why he says it needs to be removed.
Correct. That's why mechaber says it needs to be removed. Correct. Unlike what he said in Tzadik Beis, even though he's kidding that piece of meat is part of the nullification. Correct. It's part of the 6 to nullify.
No.
Very good. Beis. A piece of meat that has in it non-kosher fat. That was now cooked in a stew. And there is 60 in the whole stew to nullify that fat. Okay, so you have a kosher piece of meat, 1 ounce of fat, and now it's cooked in 60 ounces of soup. So it's all good according to the mechaber, because you have 60 to the ratio of the fat. You just have to extract the piece of meat according to the mechaber, because that original piece of meat hasn't diffused all the non-kosher fat in it. Says the mechaber, important din. So you have to be careful. You shouldn't extract anything else from the pot, so long as the piece of meat that originally absorbed the non-kosher is in there. Because you have exactly 60 ounces of soup against that 1 ounce of fat. If I take out a bowl of soup before I take out that piece of meat that had the fat in it, I no longer have 60. So there's a concern that the piece of meat with the fat in it is going to remain in there whilst it doesn't have 60 against that fat. Considering that the fat will remain more in that meat than anywhere else in the soup. When I take out a ladle full of soup, it's very possible that almost finished. Almost finished. Mama's almost finished. Then we just finished the sieve. So then it's possible that the piece of meat's going to be in there with the fat in it at a time when there's less than 60 ounces in the rest of the pot. And then the whole pot becomes treif. So don't take out anything else. Moreover, don't take it out first. Don't take it out first. Because it's possible that the fat that comes out of the meat and stays in the rest of the bowl is also not 60 to the ratio. Because you don't know how much is it.
What stops you from taking out the meat and then taking out the
because the some of the fat one second. Okay, Shach gives a whole explanation. But the way I understood it was, how do you explain that we said before in Aleph it's going to become Asr anyway?
Sorry. Anyway, let's go down.
We're still talking about the Akhbar now, by the way.
No. Yeah, okay, sorry, we're almost done the Sif. Okay, you know what? Yeah, well, let's finish quickly. So you can't take out that piece first, because then that piece will become Asr. Why it's Asr? Let's just go to Taz in the shop. Sorry?
Even when it's going to be,
it's
still going to be us.
Anyways, it's going to be Asr. That's right.
It's going to be us.
So the Shach and Taz explain that we're talking about, that it's that the problem here is it's a darabanan which you could have got away with nullifying if you left it in there. Because it's a prohibited darabanan, you could have got away with nullifying it if you left it in there. By taking it out, it's no longer nullified. You could have got away with having that piece kosher if you let it in there because it only absorbed the darabanan issue. That's the Taz puts it. Okay.
And so what is cooling off after the
so now Matakanta, what's the solution? Cools off. It's not the pot, and because it's cooled down, the diffusion is done. It's nullified by 60. That's the end of it. It's only when you take it out before it cools down and the cooking causes a diffusion that isn't an equal ratio. But once it's cooled down, the diffusion is done and its 60 ratio is done.
But when you take it out, it's not diffusing anymore. Are we agreeing on that?
If it's hot, it's still diffusing.
What do you mean? If you took it out, it can't diffuse into the soup. If you
If
you took it out, it's not diffusing into the soup. It's not there anymore.
Right. So the problem is the piece of meat's going to become kosher, treif. The one you took out is going to be treif.
You could have eaten
But
it
that-
while it's in the soup.
You could have eaten it if you let it cool down in the soup.
Oh yeah.
That in this case, that's what I'm saying, because the Taz's argument, this case is talking about afterwards a darabanan issue, where it could have been nullified if you left it in the soup.
There was a possibility.
He's saying over here, the Taz is saying that in this case, the piece of meat only absorbed the fat inside the pot, not outside. If it was outside the pot, then it would be treif, like we said before in Sif Aleph. But over here, it absorbs inside the pot. Whereas the Shach, there's a whole explanation, it's talking about it's chelev darabanan. And because it's chelev darabanan, it could have been nullified, but it's not. In the first case, in Sif Aleph, where he said the piece of meat itself is aser, Shach says that's when it absorbed the deraisa. And Sif Days, where he says leave it in there till it's nullified, that's because it absorbed the darabanan.
It was already in the pot.
One second. That's Taz. Shach says because it absorbed the derabanan. It was outside the pot. It absorbed the derabanan, and because it absorbed it was outside the pot. It was outside the pot, and it absorbed the derabanan. No problem. It was outside the pot. It absorbed the derabanan, and now it fell into the pot. Because what it absorbed was the derabanan, Therefore, if you left it in there, it would have been nullified. And it itself would have been kosher to eat.
What does that mean?
The chayla that it absorbed is derabanan. It only absorbed something which is prohibited derabanan.
Right.
And therefore, when it falls into the pot, we're not going to be so strict to say that the piece of meat itself is not kosher. As he said in Sif Aleph, where that's Shach's view in distinguishing between Aleph and Beis. The Chazzarah's view of distinguishing between Aleph and Beis is that Aleph is talking about where it absorbed the fat outside the pot, and therefore once it falls in, it doesn't matter, it's going to remain usher anyway. Whereas Sif Beis is, it only absorbed the fat inside the pot, and if I leave it sit there, it'll diffuse equally all around. That's the way the Taz understands it.
And so for both of those reasons,
Wait till it cools down. That way the rest of the pot, it gets its equal diffusion, and the original piece of meat gets its full diffusion. And then everything remains kosher. If I take either out, then either the piece of meat is not kosher because it didn't get a full diffusion. If I take something else out, it's possible that there's now less than 60 to the ratio.
take something else out.
Okay.
That's clear.
But even so, the chiddush here is, yeah.
That's quite clear.
Yeah. Okay.
Less than 60 to
what's left behind.
So you can't nullify because you took out part of the 60.
B'diuk.
So now you have only 50 against it.
Exactly.
No, but
yeah.
For states.
The other ones, the chiddush is explained b'shachar taz. Okay, now let's look at the Ramah. According to the way we rule Chanan. Mace. Right, just half a second, half a line. I know. I'm sorry. Just let's finish it. Fima the Kamalon based. They're not waiting for that. Feed the Kamalon based on what we rule. That the piece of meat becomes anyways a source of prohibition. Take out the piece right away, and everything else becomes kosher because it itself is chanan. Right, saying that you want to leave it in there, you anyways have to have 60 against it.
Right.
So taking it out is not going to ruin your 60 because it is not part of the 60 that's required for nullification. Right. So take it out, and that's it. Okay, so we'll do some practical stuff from this after Mincha. Okay, so that was a little clarification that I actually missed in the Mechaber because I understood it the way you did, the Pesach. That I understood the Mechaber when I first read it the way you did, which is that you have to extract that piece of meat because don't extract that piece of meat because it's part of the 60, and if you lose 60 in the rest, right. That's what I thought it meant, but it's not. It's because he's worried about the piece itself being usher. Chelev shaba yeser oisa, and that seems to contradict Sif Aleph, and there you have the Shach and the Taz and their different resolutions. Okay, the practical take with all of this is as follows: if following the sheet of the Ramah, here's the practical takeaway. If Isser itself falls directly into a Kedera, into a
right.
mixture,
60 against it,
you obviously want to take that thing out as fast as possible.
Right.
The Isser itself, that's clear. Right? You want to get rid of the Isser itself.
And
use a plastic, and you don't leave it till it cools off because you have the Isser itself there, you know where it is, get rid of it. Right. Okay. Now, in that case, also, you want to use a plastic spoon because you don't want to make whatever's in the spoon be absorbent from that non-kosher.
Right.
Okay? We'll learn that also soon. And that's practical takeaway number one. Practical takeaway number two is the u'LeMaaseh. Because we follow the Ramah, even when the piece of meat, even if the Isser itself didn't fall in, but the Isser itself falls into a piece of meat, and then the whole thing falls into a piece of meat, because according to the Ramah, you anyways have to have 60 against the whole piece of meat. So again, extract the piece of meat as fast as possible. Whereas according to the Mechaber, you should not. That's essentially the subtotal of this siman. Yeah? Okay. On the sif. Simin Zion. All right, Simin Kuf Zion, chapter 107. Dina Mavashal Bates of Dover Milos and into Tafshal, the law of cooking eggs and fish, as we'll learn in the Ramah, and the halacha of something that is something that is repulsive that's found in our food. Boy Sifmin has two subsections. Aleph. Amavashal Beitzim Harbe, one who cooks many eggs. And we're talking in the old day where the eggs are natural eggs and fertilized eggs, and the probability or the likelihood or the possibility that there's going to be fat, what you're going to find is an actual halfway hatched chicken or halfway grown chicken in that egg. So he says, "Lo yotzim mahamayim shenes bashlo behem." Do not take out the eggs from the water that they're being boiled in until the water cools down and diffusion stops. Or add cold water, to cool down the boiling water. And then take out the eggs. The point is wait till it cools down. Why is that? Because we're nervous that the following is going to happen. You're going to take out all the eggs. Okay? And then you're going to open them up. And one of the eggs you open up, you find out, you're going to find a chicken in there, a little chick or partially developed chicken there. Now, you don't know which one came out when. You don't know if this egg that has the chicken in there, which is non-kosher, you don't know if it was taken out first, last, or middle. And therefore, if you were to extract them all before they cool down, Shema, perhaps, so he said, perhaps the one that has the chicken in it was left behind with some of the last ones. So you put, let's just, for argument's sake, you put 61 eggs, and it so happens that the chick was taken out at number 30. So all the 30 eggs that follow it, all the other 30 eggs would be non-kosher.
Right? Isn't one egg or another egg mentioned anything?
The chicken is not. Chicken is not. Okay. So would prohibit the other eggs.
The negative shell, if it had a partial skeleton or developing chick inside,
Yeah.
that would not be considered an egg. That's what I'm saying.
It's not an egg anymore. It's a chicken, yeah. So because at the time that it was taken out, there was no 60 to nullify it. So therefore, either you dump them all out at once, or you wait till they cool down and you take them out, in which case the diffusion stopped. And therefore, even if you did found this chick, this partially developed chick, you have 60 to nullify it. Now, continues the Rambam. Now, for whatever reason, although on Sunday, when we learned our introduction, we learned that this din comes along with the din of fish. The same thing applies to small little fish. And you find out later that one of them is non-kosher. And we had the three different views, right? We had the three different views. If both you're stringent in both, you're lenient in both, or you're only stringent about fish, not about eggs. Right? Or was it? Right? Or the other way around. Because you're stringent with eggs, not eggs, because eggs don't cook that much. And that's what the Machaber is at. He's taking only talk about the eggs, not the fish. But in Adrama, if you didn't do this, you didn't wait till it cools down. You pour them out into a plate. You now found one of them to be a trefa, it's a partially developing chicken.
What's that? Now you're saying that's a cliche?
Nothing to do with cliche. The prohibition happened before it was poured out. But because you poured it out and didn't wait for it to cool down, we don't know at which point the trefa came out. So it's possible the trefa was in there while it didn't have 60 against it in a clearation.
It didn't have 60.
Because you don't know when it came out. You don't know at which point it came out. And therefore, everything would become prohibited. Because we're concerned. See, the Machaber doesn't speak about what happens with Yevid. He just says, L'chatchila, don't do this. Doesn't say what happens if you didn't do it the way I told you to. Machaber doesn't spell it out. So Ramah spells it out, saying we're going to go so far as to say, or at least there are those that would go so far as to say everything else is treif. Right? Perhaps the treifa egg was there at the end. And it was in a cleavation in the original pot without 60 against it. The Neser and everything that's in the pot is prohibited. And according to the Ramah, Hanan, everything becomes treifa. And therefore, the fact that it's going to be nullified later in 60 is irrelevant, because this all became Hanan. And therefore, it's going to go ahead and prohibit everything else that's in the plate. It's not necessarily what the Machaber say that. Machaber might say, be careful, but the Eved, what would the Machaber say? Maybe we would say it's okay. But the Ramah is saying, even if you go all the way, even if the Eved, I would say it's a problem. Because maybe it was left behind when it didn't have 60, all becomes Hanan, and that all treififies that which goes in, that which everything else in the plate,
Because it's gonna.
which again doesn't have 60 against it.
There were 61 eggs.
Yeah.
62 eggs. Eggs take 61.
Let's say 62 eggs.
Five.
Right, if there's 61 to that.
And then you poured out the first egg, which was good. So all the rest is no good.
Correct. And then the original egg will also be no good when it comes in contact with the rest of it.
One egg that you poured out first, that still would be good.
No, because you only found that at the end. So you don't know which one's which. You only
Oh, yeah, so you don't know which
exactly.
is which, you won't
So
know
it's
which.
possible that all of these are treif and they made everything else treif. It could be 10 of these are treif that made everything else treif.
Right.
Okay. Now, that's number one. Number two, he's adding now the other case which the Machaber left out. The same thing is true with small little fish.
I took out one, right? And I opened it up and there was no skeleton in there.
Then it's fine.
Then I could eat that one.
That's right. But number two, you couldn't.
Number two, I couldn't.
Because number two maybe doesn't have 60 to the ratio in it, and maybe the other one's a treifa. Right? Correct. Right? Okay. The same thing's going to be with small little fish, says the Rama. If when you poured it on the plate, you found one non-kosher fish. You didn't dump them all out at once. Into your plate. So again, you didn't dump them out all at once. You didn't wait till it cooled down. You extracted one by one and put it on your plate. And then you found out one of them is not kosher. Because now we have this concern again. Maybe the non-kosher fish was there at the end. And it prohibited all the other fish that was with it in the original pot. And now when it's poured into the plate, it's making everything else prohibited. Same problem.
Right.
That is one opinion.
What's the difference between that and eggs?
No difference. According to this view, no difference. But there are those who are lenient all the way in both cases of fish and eggs. That was the other extreme we mentioned on Sunday. Why? We have no reason to assume that the prohibited was there at a time when it didn't have 60. Right now it has 60 in front of us. So I don't have to assume that at some point it didn't have 60. No reason for me to assume that. That's the other view that's an extreme lenient side. And this is actually a primary view. To be lenient in all.
What do you mean?
To be lenient in all, and not to assume that there was a prohibited problem at some point. That's what the Machaber said, or Rama says.
How could you be lenient?
Because
Fish that's unkosher.
so right now, you're looking at a plate with one fish that's non-kosher, is 60 nullification. Take out the non-kosher fish and eat the rest. There's no reason for me to assume that at some point there wasn't 60. That's what this view says. This view says, is if in front of you you have 60 nullification, accept it, and that's the end of it. I don't have to backtrack and assume that at one point there wasn't 60.
You couldn't have taken them out with one thing. You took out one at a time. You took them. How did you get there?
Okay, how did I get to that?
How did you get there?
Maybe it was the last one that came out. No, the last one was a problem. Maybe it was the first one that came out.
That's also a problem.
No, because that would be in cliche already. It would be in cliche, it would be that. The point is, you don't have to assume.
If the first one that came out is invalid, then for sure it's fine.
Yeah.
For sure it's fine. But what's the idea of being lenient here?
You don't have to assume. That's this view. This view is we looked at on Sunday. That you don't have to assume that at any point there was less than 60. Where's that hay? Where's my Taz? Yeah. So the middle ground view is that we take this lenient opinion only by fish, because fish is common to cook many fish, many more than 60 to the ratio. In which case, it's totally possible that there was never a point when there was 60. Whereas when it comes to, if the Taz quotes in the Rashal, but when it comes to eggs, because you don't cook that many at a time, it's very probable that at some point there wasn't 60 to the ratio of it.
It's even more probable that there were never 60 against it.
Well, at the beginning, at the end, there is 60 against it.
No,
the question is in the middle.
You have to cook 62 eggs.
So that's right. So I know there was 62 eggs. But when it comes to fish, however, because there's often much more, be lenient. But anyway, there is this view to be lenient completely and not to assume prohibition when it's not in front of me. I don't need to assume prohibition when it's not in front of me. This is the main point of this view. And the Ramah taking that this is the correct view. The Taz says to be stringent by eggs and lenient by fish. Okay, says the Ramah, this is the Iker view. And continues the Ramah. Even those opinions that are more stringent and lesser, you don't have to make those vessels non-kosher to kosherize them, because we keep the vessel in its original status, which was kosher, and not making it usher on the off shot that maybe there wasn't 60 at the right time.
Mhm. If you want to be stringent about the content, you're gonna be okay
Yeah.
on the bottom.
Okay, nowadays we know about eggs, that eggs today are not, even the blood that we say is prohibited is only because of marasayan, but the idea of cooking 3 eggs comes from this, because you want to have at least the majority nullification. Even though nowadays the blood is marasayan, it's not because it's not real blood, the blood that we see in our eggs, unless
What
maybe
is it?
they're,
Actually, what is it?
I don't even know what it is, but it's not a potentially developing chicken, that blood, right? Because
I was in Romania years ago, a couple of times, and all my kosher food didn't arrive. So I bought a skillet and I got eggs,
and you found,
and I found like every third one, every fourth one.
I saw that in Uruguay too.
had blood.
So not just blood, I saw partial developing chicken in there. Yeah, yeah. But here in America, Canada, that's not a thing. So anyway, the blood that we are prohibited, sorry,
Okay,
but the blood that we see that we throw out is because of minus iron. And but those are still stringent anyway to keep the rule of 3, and that's the custom that I grew up with and that I still do in my house.
everybody follows
Yeah, I think pretty universal. Okay, what time did you say Meyer was? 30,
that.
32? Okay. Let's we're pausing here for Meyer. We have 2 minutes. Okay, let's learn a little bit more. We'll stop after the Machaber. Machaber said base. Zvuv, a fly. Like that are repulsive, which a person is reviled by them, which is found in a pot, zarkon, throw it out, mutter, and the rest of the pot is okay. Because because the thing itself, we're not worried about, you just throw it out. The ikr. The tam is the only problem. And the tam is levgam, and if I don't care. Yeah. Now, says the Ramah, this is indeed the standard practice. Even though we learned already in Kuv Dalid, we learned this yesterday, that there are those that are stringent to treat the flies the same way as Akbar, and to say that maybe it gives a positive flavor in other things. Nonetheless, those who are lenient, that's the primary view. And don't change the custom of being lenient. Okay. Now I'm going to pause here and go to Maida because now he's going to get back to the link to the first sif, which is when you're taking out Isser, which is not a fly, that's negative. It's a positive. Be careful not to ruin the spoon that you're taking the non-kosher out with, which will make it a problem when you want to put the spoon back into your bowl. That's what we're going to learn after Maida. Okay, so the first half of the sif we just said, everybody agrees the proper custom is to take the fly, throw it out if you find it in your food. And we're not concerned about 60 to the ratio because it's nice and town of gam. Even though there are those who are stringent, as we already saw in as we already saw in I don't know what just happened here. No, we're still good. Close that. Okay, as we already saw in Sadik Dalid. Nonetheless, we are lenient to say that it's in town of gam. Okay, now comes the second half of the Sif, which is a very important practical halach. Now, im lakach im hakaf. If a person used a spoon to take dog tummy, a non-kosher fish, minakadeta from the pot, or shardov or anything else, she'ena pogim, which is not going to cause negative flavor. So you use the spoon to extract your non-kosher. And it's not a negative flavor. Also, you cannot now put the spoon back into your bowl because it absorbed at a clear level from the prohibited at the moment of extraction. And if you did go ahead and return that spoon to your bowl, to your pot, So samach menakadeda neged iser. You now have to have 60. You have to have 60 against the prohibited. Neged kolav kaf. You don't have to have 60 against the actual ladle. You only have to have 60 against the non-kosher that was taken out by the ladle. Because that's what it was. That's what it absorbed. It's in kosher. Right? Das atzma. This is the Ramah's view. Because you don't say chanan by keli. The keli itself doesn't become chanan. So you don't need
You need 60 against
60 against the size of the iser. Because that's the max that it absorbed
against yes.
to put the spoon back in. Because the max the spoon absorbed is the amount of the iser. So when the spoon goes back in, you have to nullify the iser that it likely has absorbed. But if when I scooped out the non-kosher, I also scooped out some of the soup. So I used the ladle to take out this non-kosher, and in that ladle came along with it soup. Yeah, along with the prohibited in the spoon. And now the ladle was put back into the pot. So you have to now have 60 to the ratio of the spoon of the rest of the soup that was taken out with the non-kosher. Because when I picked up that ladle, and in that ladle is a spoon and the non-kosher fish and the non-kosher whatever, and it's not nice and tam of gam. So all that soup that's in the ladle became chanan, and that's chanan soup is now into the spoon. So now when into the ladle, when I put the ladle back in, I don't just have to have 60 to the ratio of the prohibited. I have to have 60 to the ratio of the prohibited plus the kosher that came out with it. Okay. Any practical stuff that come from this sif. This is why it's very careful. You want to use a plastic disposable spoon to take out prohibited stuff so that we throw it out right away. That would be advisable.
This was not prohibited, but not the barrier, not the fly.
The fly itself, of course, you're throwing
The
out.
fly was no problem.
The fly wasn't a problem because it's negative flavor.
Yeah.
This is if it's positive flavor. Yeah. So first of all, you want to use a plastic spoon to throw it out. Number one. Number two, it's clear from the Rambam that if you did go ahead and use an actual spoon to extract the non-kosher, because the Rambam says if you put it back in, you need nullification, that would imply that the actual spoon requires hagala. Clearly, it doesn't say so, but it's clear that it requires hagala.
But if you put it in accidentally, well, okay, it would still need a gullah, but it wouldn't spoil the rest.
If you
Right.
put it in and there was 60 against it, you would still need hagala, even though you didn't. Even though yes, correct, you still need hagala. Correct. But when you take out a fly, it doesn't need hagala because nice and time was gone. But even with these things, you should nonetheless use a spoon in the first instance. Even by flies, you should use a disposable because you remember the Shach said to be stringent according to the other views that say that the fly does cause positive flavor, like the Akbar, and he said only have simiruba, you couldn't be lenient. That's the Shach's view. So to account for that view, just use a one-time disposable spoon to extract your fly, and then you're good to go. Siman Kov Ches.
Yeah.
Let's see how far we can get with this. Sorry?
There's two opinions on fly.
Well, the Rambam mentioned both views and said the minig is mekel, but we are learned from the Shach that we are mekel and have simiruba because we're to be stringent according to the other views that say that zvuv is like an akbar which can cause positive flavor. Okay. Kuf Ches. Shaloi Lefais, it's a bit of a longer simin, and there is quite a bit of practical stuff, certainly at the beginning. So let's see how far we get. It's already 8:50. And is it shy? People want to come back Friday morning to finish this up for half an hour?
Are you going to finish all of this in a half an hour?
No, not now. Now I'm going to go as far as I can. So we'll need at least another half an hour, 40 minutes to do the rest after we finish tonight. Question is if people are for Friday morning. No. This is the first time we have to go more than 2 nights. And it's because of Mincha Ma'ariv. Last time we only got it. The shir last night came out on the recording 35 minutes of learning instead of an hour. If we had the full hour, we might be able to have done it. Next week. Sorry? Now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see how far we can go. I don't want to sit too long.
Want to do it at 6:30?
6:30. I give a chiddush here already.
Huh?
I give a chiddush every morning, 6:30. Yeah. Okay, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have to.
Shabbos?
Shabbos is right. Gets late. Okay, okay, I want to do Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Okay, let's start. Let's see what happens. I'll think of some options. We'll do it, and God willing, next week we'll have to organize a share in such a way that we have an hour before Mincha starts. We'll have to organize the share for next week that way. Okay. There's only one more week of before the test, before Chazzarah, by the way. There's only one more week of content.
And it's going to be the
Test Yud. The next unit is Kuftes and Yud, and then there's 3 weeks of Chazzarah. So maybe we'll just defer a little bit, and we'll be one day behind. So maybe we'll finish Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh on Sunday, do the intro share on Wednesday, Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh the next Sunday, and then 3 weeks of Chazzarah. Then we'll do that. Okay.
Next week's supposed to be Kuftes
And Yud, Kuf Yud, and then Chazzarah for Tzul test.
3 weeks of review.
3 weeks of review till the test, Klap Shavuos. So maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe we'll just keep the same schedule, but we're going to be delayed by one section. So we'll finish Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh. So you know what? Let's do this now. We'll do Kuf Ches Sunday morning, Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh. We'll do our intro to Kuf Tes Kuf Yud Wednesday. We'll do Chazzarah u'LeMaaseh Kuf Ches Kuf Yud the next Sunday, and then you'll have the
So we'll push everything.
up by one. Right, because we're anyways about to hit a 3 week break of Chazzarah, so we'll push everything up by one class, and we'll leave Kuf Ches to do it entirely Gelassen, and have to rush our way through it on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And that's the plan. Okay. So I'll go to Nachgiden. First, then Pesach Sheni. The minhag is to actually eat matzah tonight. Because that is when
Tomorrow night?
it's tomorrow night when the Eden would have eaten. Actually, there's meant to eat it 3 times. Tonight and tomorrow by day, and tomorrow night by Shabbos. Probably you don't say you did say takum today.
I mean, you do say
You did.
today because
You're right. I'm sorry. The Iker is actually tomorrow night. You know, the Iker is tomorrow night. Tomorrow night would have been when they would have eaten the Korban Pesach. Tomorrow afternoon would have been when they brought the Korban Pesach. So the minhag is to eat tomorrow afternoon when they would have brought, and tomorrow night when they would have eaten. But there's even a minhag to eat it now as well. It's brought down that minhag as well. But you're right. It's taken. That's why we did daven. I spoke about this on Shabbos this week.
Yeah, you spoke about this, yeah.
That's the minhag. That's why we say Tachanun this afternoon, because the Yom Tov didn't really start tonight. It's only tomorrow when it starts, going into tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. Okay, for the Pesach Sheni. Oh, it's Mamshon theme. There's never no such thing as lost cause. So we didn't finish it now. No such thing as a lost cause. We can make it up. Don't worry, it's all good. Stuck in for we have a second chance. We'll make it up on Sunday. Okay, wonderful evening, Eden.